K9 German Shepherd puppy found in the most unbelievable place. Deep in the Colorado Rockies, a rescue team was scanning the aftermath of a devastating avalanche. They expected to find nothing but snow, silence, and loss. But then, a faint, desperate whimper echoed through the frozen air. Buried beneath layers of ice and broken pine branches, they found something no one could have imagined. A trembling, mud-covered K9 German Shepherd puppy, barely alive, curled up inside a hollowed tree trunk. But how did a military-bred pup end up there, alone in the wilderness? What the team uncovered next would lead them into a mystery involving a missing handler, a hidden military past, and a puppy whose spirit reckoned to die. This story isn't just about survival. It's about loyalty, courage, and how even the smallest voice can echo through the mountains and change everything. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring more inspiring stories like this to you, stories that remind us why dogs aren't just pets, they're heroes in fur. The blizzard had rolled in faster than anyone predicted. By morning, half the mountainside was gone, swallowed by an avalanche that ripped through the Colorado wilderness like a freight train. Trees were flattened, trails erased, and the only sounds left were the sharp winds and the cautious crunch of boots over snow. Caleb Monroe, a seasoned rescue volunteer with Mountain Search and Recovery, trudged through the wreckage alongside his golden retriever, Scout. They were looking for signs of life, or at least closure for the families who hadn't heard from their hikers since the storm. Caleb had seen disasters before, but something about this one felt colder, emptier. That's when Scout stopped. The dog's ears perked. He sniffed the wind, then ran toward a cluster of snow-covered logs near the edge of a collapsed ridge. Caleb followed, careful not to trigger a secondary slide. "Easy, boy," he whispered, reaching the pile. Scout began to dig, paws fast and frantic. Caleb dropped to his knees, helping clear the snow, his gloves tearing against ice. A sliver of tree bark appeared, then a crevice, and then a sound. A whimper, soft, weak, alive. Caleb froze. "Wait, is that?" He reached deeper and felt fur. Thin, cold, shivering. With one final tug, he pulled the tiny creature into his arms, a German Shepherd puppy, no older than 10 weeks, covered in soot and snowmelt. Its ribs showed. One ear stood up awkwardly while the other flopped down. Its breathing was shallow, but its eyes, wide and amber, locked onto Caleb's face with a look that said, "Don't leave me." What in the world? There were no houses nearby, no breeders, no reason for a purebred K9 pup to be here, much less alive. Scout sniffed the pup gently, tail wagging as if acknowledging a fellow rescuer. Caleb wrapped the trembling puppy in his jacket and radioed base. "Found something. Or someone," he said, voice tight with disbelief. "You're not gonna believe this." At the rescue station in Silver Pine, the vet, Dr. Elena Graves, examined the pup with furrowed brows. "He's dehydrated, underfed, and his paws are raw from walking on ice. But he's strong, very strong." Caleb stood nearby, watching the puppy sleep beneath a heating lamp. How does a dog like that end up in the middle of a mountain? Elena adjusted the pup's IV line. "That's no ordinary dog, Caleb. Look." She pulled a tag from the collar, a small metal ID, half bent and caked with dirt. Caleb cleaned it with a towel. Engraved on the back, Unit 7K9, Project Sentinel. "Project Sentinel?" Caleb read aloud. Elena nodded slowly. "That's military." "Wait, you're telling me this is a military K9? A puppy, yes, but bred for K9 service. Most likely part of a specialized training unit. But Project Sentinel was shut down a year ago. Rumors say it involved something classified." Caleb looked at the sleeping pup, stunned. So what was he doing up there? And where's his handler? Elena didn't answer, but her expression said everything. Something wasn't right. That night, back at his cabin, Caleb couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about those amber eyes, the way the puppy had clung to his chest. The sheer will it must have taken to survive in a storm like that, alone, terrified, barely old enough to walk. He finally stood, pulled on a hoodie, and walked outside into the quiet snow. The stars were out. The mountains, still haunted by the avalanche, loomed in silence. And from the guest room, he heard a sound. Not a bark, not a whimper, but a growl, low, alert, protective. Caleb rushed in. The puppy was standing, fur bristling, eyes fixed on the window. Something was out there. Something that made even a canine pup raised in chaos remember what he was trained to fear. Caleb's breath caught as he crossed the room in 2 steps and pulled back the curtain. Snow drifted gently under the moonlight, and pine trees stood like frozen sentinels. At first, he saw nothing. Just the stillness of the forest and the whisper of wind across the glass. But the pup, now crouched low on the bed, muscles tight, lips parted in a silent snarl, wouldn't look away. Then Caleb saw it. A silhouette, barely visible, standing just beyond the tree line, watching. Whoever it was didn't know, didn't flinch, just stood there like a statue draped in shadow. Caleb felt a chill that had nothing to do with the snow. He reached for the small flashlight by his bed and clicked it on. When the beam hit the trees, the figure was gone. The puppy barked once, sharp and defiant. "Okay," Caleb whispered, his pulse rising. "You saw that too." He locked the door, checked the windows, and laid the pup back down with a blanket. But sleep didn't come easy that night. His mind spun with questions. Why would someone be watching this cabin? And what did they want with a half-starved canine pup? By morning, the sky was a pale silver, and the world outside was coated in frost. Caleb drove the pup back to Dr. Elena's clinic for another checkup. The dog, now more alert, sat quietly in the passenger seat, occasionally glancing at Caleb, as if trying to understand who he was and why he had rescued him. "All right, little guy," Caleb muttered with a half-smile. "Time to find out what you're hiding." At the clinic, Elena had good news. "He's gaining strength quickly. Appetite's back. Temperature is normal." "Has he barked at anyone else?" "No, just you," Caleb nodded. "He growled at something last night, something outside the cabin." Elena looked up. "You think someone's looking for him?" "I don't think," Caleb said. "I know." She sighed and pulled up her laptop. "I've been digging into Project Sentinel. Not much is public, but I did find a research file that leaked last year, redacted of course, about an experimental canine breeding program focused on emotional tracking and environmental detection. They were trying to raise dogs that could predict threats before humans even saw them." Caleb frowned. "You're saying he's psychic?" "No," she said carefully. "But he might be trained, or genetically predisposed, to react to subtle danger cues. Fear chemicals, sound vibrations, even changes in human emotion." Caleb looked over at the puppy, now sleeping peacefully under a heating lamp. "That's why he growled. He felt something I didn't." Elena nodded. "And if that's true, someone out there probably wants him back." Later that afternoon, Caleb made a decision. He drove past the sheriff's office, the gas station, and the grocery store, then turned down a narrow road toward his late father's cabin deeper in the forest, a place no one had lived in for years. If anyone was looking for the puppy, Caleb needed somewhere off-grid, quiet, and untraceable. The moment they arrived, the pup seemed alert again. He sniffed the air, ears perked, tail twitching. Inside, Caleb lit a fire, unpacked supplies, and laid out a blanket on the floor. The puppy circled once, then curled up beside him, closer than before. "You're different, you know that?" Caleb said softly. "Not just smart, it's like you know me." The pup lifted his head and licked Caleb's hand once before resting it back down. For the first time, Caleb said it out loud. "I'm gonna call you Ranger." The name felt right. Suddenly, a crack outside. Caleb tensed. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped onto the porch. But this time, there were footprints in the snow, not old ones. Fresh, just moments old, and they were leading away from the cabin. Someone had been watching again, but this time, they weren't hiding anymore. Caleb knelt at the edge of the porch, tracing the fresh footprints with a trembling finger. They weren't from a hiker or a neighbor. The boot pattern was wide, heavy-duty, likely military or tactical, and the way the tracks disappeared into the dense woods, fast, deliberate, controlled, told him whoever had been watching was trained. Ranger stood at the doorway, hackles raised, nose twitching. He didn't bark. He didn't whine. He just stared into the trees, dead still. "Who the hell are they?" Caleb whispered, standing slowly. His breath misted in the air as he stepped down into the snow, following the tracks for a few yards. Then they stopped, literally vanished. No backtrack, no scatter, no sign of turning around. Caleb's eyes scanned the trees, searching for any clue. The wind picked up. Silence pressed in. Ranger barked. Once. Sharp, urgent. Caleb turned fast. And that's when he saw it. A small object buried in the snow, just off the path. Black. Half frozen. He stepped over and picked it up. A military-grade dog tag, not like the one on Ranger's collar. This one was longer, with a silver strip over its front and a symbol etched onto the back. A triangle inside a circle wrapped in barbed wire. Caleb had never seen it before, but Ranger had. The pup let out a low growl and took a step back. "You know this," Caleb said softly. "Wherever you came from, it's not done with you." Back at the cabin, Caleb lit a fire and placed the dog tag on the table between them. He watched as Ranger approached it warily, sniffed it, then looked away as if it hurt to remember. Caleb sat back. "You're not just a stray, and someone didn't just lose you." He remembered Elena's words. Project Sentinel was shut down, quietly, suddenly, which meant it hadn't failed. It had been covered up. Caleb grabbed his laptop and fired up an encrypted connection he hadn't used since his days with the National Guard. He wasn't just a mountain rescue worker. He'd done time overseas, in dusty corners of the world where silence was safety. He knew how to dig. He searched for the symbol on the dog tag. Dozens of dead ends. Then one hit. A blurred PDF titled Shadow Tag, Unofficial Units and Unauthorized Canine Experiments, Archived. Inside, buried on page 39, was a paragraph about Unit X7 Delta, stationed in northern Nevada under a classified defense initiative known as Sentinel Echo. According to the document, only one litter was ever born under the program, 5 German Shepherd pups, all bred for sensory intelligence and combat loyalty. 4 were accounted for. 1 was listed as missing in transport. Caleb stared at Ranger. "No way," he muttered. "You're the missing one?" As if in answer, Ranger trotted over, placed a paw on the laptop, and nudged Caleb's hand with his nose. A connection sparked. Unspoken, deep, primal. This wasn't just a rescue story anymore. It was a recovery mission. The next day, Caleb drove into town with Ranger by his side. He stopped at the sheriff's office first. "Anything unusual reported out by Mill Creek?" he asked. Sheriff Lyle, a thick-bearded man with too much coffee and not enough concern, shook his head. Just that blizzard damage, why? Just had some weird prints around the cabin. Thought I'd ask. Lyle leaned back in his chair. You think it's a mountain lion or more like combat boots? Lyle's expression darkened. You see a face? No, just a presence. And something left behind. Caleb didn't say more. He couldn't trust anyone yet. Not until he knew how deep this ran. But he did stop at the gear store on the way home, bought a motion sensor camera, thermal binoculars, and a drone. That night, he set it all up. Ranger helped, following him, staying close, never making a sound, as if he knew what they were doing. And just before midnight, the thermal cam buzzed. Movement. A figure again, this time closer. The camera pinged. Ranger ran to the door, and on the screen a man appeared. Tall black jacket, face partially hidden. Then he looked directly into the lens and smiled. He knew. They were watching him, and now he was watching back. The next morning, Caleb didn't wake to sunlight or snow. He woke to silence, a heavy, unnatural kind, the kind that came before something went wrong. Ranger was already at the window, growling low, eyes fixed on the woods. Caleb grabbed his boots, slid into his flannel, and checked the motion camera logs. Nothing. But that didn't mean much. Whoever this man was, he knew how to move without being willing. Caleb looked at Ranger. Stay close. The pup padded beside him as they moved toward the drone station at the edge of the property. Caleb fired it up and sent it buzzing upward, scanning the tree line, the frozen trail, the road leading in and out of the forest. Nothing. Then, movement. At the far edge of the ridge, where the tree line met the abandoned fire road, stood a man. Same jacket, same silhouette. But this time, he had something in his hands. A duffel bag and a leash. He didn't run, didn't hide. He stood there like he was waiting. Caleb grabbed his gear, secured Ranger in a vest, and made the hike. Snow cracked under their boots and paws, and the cold stung like needles, but they pushed on. When they arrived, the man was still there. Tall, military build, face weathered, with a thick scar just under his left eye. He raised his hands slowly. I'm not here to hurt the dog, he said. His voice was deep, steady, American. Caleb stepped between him and Ranger. Then why are you here? The man knelt slowly. Because he's mine. Ranger let out a short, unsure bark. Caleb didn't budge. Explain, now. The man nodded. Name's Cole Hawthorne. Former handler with the Sentinel Echo program. Unit X7 Delta. That dog, he was my assigned pup. Code name was Ghost. He was the runt of the litter. Small, smart, too sensitive for most missions. Too sensitive? Cole nodded. They wanted war dogs, machines. But Ghost, he felt everything. He used to crawl under my cot during storms, tremble when the others barked too loud. They said he was a failure. Caleb looked down at Ranger. Calm, alert, present. Cole continued. I tried to protect him. I knew he wasn't ready, but the lab didn't care. They transported him early. Well, 1 week later, the convoy crashed during a winter test run in Nevada. They told me he died in the snow. Caleb's voice sharpened. So why didn't you look for him? I did, Cole said, standing. For months. Off the record. But the program was shut down. Everything buried. Threats were made. I had to disappear. And now you're back? I got a tip 3 days ago. Someone spotted a pup matching Ghost's ID tag. I drove all night. Ranger stepped forward slowly, eyes locked on Cole. And then he whimpered. walked right up to the man, and rested his head on Cole's boot. Caleb's breath caught. The recognition was real, deep, instant. Cole knelt, eyes misting. "Hey, buddy, you remember me?" Ranger licked his hand once. No bark, no fear, just trust. Caleb stepped back. 100 emotions swirled at once. Relief, betrayal, disbelief. "So what now?" Cole looked at him. "Now, I take him home." But Ranger didn't move. He stayed between them, tail low, looking from one man to the other, as if torn. Caleb crouched. What if home isn't where he came from? Cole frowned. "I saved him," Caleb said. "Not because he's special, but because he deserved to be." Cole stood, "And I trained him, raised him. You said it yourself. He was never built for the missions. Maybe this time he gets to choose." They both looked at Ranger. The pup tilted his head, then walked over to Caleb, sat beside him, and said. Cole's jaw tightened. "Guess I've got my answer." They shared coffee on the porch later, two men from different wars, bound by the same dog. Cole left just before dusk, promising to keep quiet, but offering one last warning. "They're still looking," he said. "There were other dogs, other programs, and someone doesn't want this one free." Caleb watched his truck vanish into the snow, then looked down at Ranger. "You chose me," he whispered. "Now it's my turn to protect you." And in the woods, something moved again. They weren't done yet. 2 days passed. Caleb didn't sleep much. Every creak of the cabin, every gust of wind outside, made his hand tighten around the shotgun he kept by the door. Ranger stayed closer than ever, his ears constantly perked, eyes always scanning the windows. The visit from Cole Hawthorne hadn't eased anything. It had only confirmed what Caleb feared. Ranger wasn't just a puppy that got lost in the snow. He was a target, a survivor of something secret and dangerous. And whatever Sentinel Echo had been, it wasn't over. Not yet. On the third night, just past 2 a.m., the motion alert buzzed on Caleb's phone. He sprang out of bed. Ranger was already at the window, growling. Caleb checked the feed. Movement. East camera. He pulled up the live video and froze. It wasn't a person. It was a drone. Black, silent, and hovering just above the tree line, scanning the property with a red infrared beam. "Damn it!" Caleb hissed. "They found us." He pulled on jeans and a jacket, slung the shotgun over his shoulder, and moved outside with Ranger at his side. The night was dead quiet. The air had that dry bite that comes before snowfall. Caleb crept around the cabin, flashlight off, eyes adjusting to the moonlight. The drone hovered another 20 seconds, then shot upward and vanished into the stars. But something was left behind. On the porch sat a small black box. No note, no markings. Caleb picked it up carefully, brought it inside, and opened it with a knife. Inside was a flash drive and a single item wrapped in tissue paper. Ranger sniffed it first, then backed away, whimpering. Caleb unwrapped it. A dog collar, military grade, covered in blood. He stared at it, cold dread washing over him. The tag read, K9 Bravo, Unit X7 Delta 2. Another pup from the Sentinel litter. Another gone. He inserted the flash drive into his laptop, eyes scanning the files. They were video logs. Dozens. One of them labeled, Last Known Footage. Bravo! He clicked. The screen flickered to life. A dim hallway. Cement floors. Screams in the background. Men in lab coats rushing past the camera. Then, a German Shepherd pup, slightly larger than Ranger, chained to a metal wall. Whimpering, pulling away from something off screen. A voice spoke. Subject Bravo. Failed environmental tolerance test. Initiate next stage. The screen went black. Caleb sat back, stunned. His hands were shaking. Ranger climbed onto the couch beside him, rested his head on Caleb's leg, and let out a soft whine. A sound that broke him in half. You saw that, didn't you? Caleb whispered. You remember. The pup didn't move. Caleb stood and paced the room. This isn't about just finding you. They're sending a message. Bravo's gone, you're next. He looked down at Ranger. Not if I can help it. The next morning, Caleb packed his truck. Ranger's food, medical supplies, drone gear, backup cameras. They were leaving the cabin, but not running. They were going to the source. If Bravo's tag was sent here, that meant someone knew where Ranger was, someone who had access. It was time to find them first. Caleb made one stop before heading out, Elena's clinic. He burst through the door just as she was unlocking for the day. Caleb? She said, startled. What's wrong? He dropped the collar on her desk. They killed Bravo. Her face went pale. I need everything you can find on whoever shut Sentinel down. Internal names, contractors, lab connections, anything. She nodded slowly. You're not planning to go after them, are you? I'm planning to finish what they started. Ranger stood by the door, tail low, but eyes full of quiet fire. Elena walked around the counter and knelt in front of him. They tried to break you, she whispered. But you made it out. She looked up at Caleb. So maybe the only way this ends is by shining light where they hid everything. Caleb nodded. That's exactly what I intend to do. He turned to Ranger and opened the truck door. Let's go, partner. We've got ghosts to find. And somewhere, not far enough away, the next stage of the hunt had already begun. They drove through the night. Caleb hadn't spoken in hours, eyes locked on the empty highway as it curved through Nevada's high desert. Ranger sat alert in the passenger seat, nose twitching every few minutes, ears constantly shifting with every noise, as if he knew they were heading towards something important. By sunrise, they reached the coordinates Elena had uncovered, an old military training ground listed as decommissioned, deep in the desert near Tonopah. But according to her data traces, it had never stopped operating, at least not officially. Caleb stopped the truck on the side of a dirt road, half a mile from the rusted chain-link fence that surrounded the compound. The facility itself was low and concrete, with sun-faded camouflage paint and broken windows. Desert wind whispered across the dunes like ghosts of the past. Looks abandoned, Caleb muttered. Ranger growled low in his throat. Exactly, Caleb added. They approached on foot, keeping low, hugging the hills for cover. Caleb carried his drone pack and a loaded sidearm. Ranger padded silently beside him, not once breaking stride. They reached the fence, cut through, and slipped inside. Up close, the building reeked of chemicals and something more disturbing. Decay. The moment they crossed the threshold, Ranger froze. He sniffed the air, stiffened, then bolted forward toward a door marked Kennels, Restricted. Ranger! Caleb hissed. Wait! But the pup was already inside, barking now. Loudly, frantically. Caleb followed fast, and when he caught up, he stopped cold. They stood in a long hallway, lined with cages. Most were empty. Some still had names taped to the doors. Delta, Echo, Bravo. Ghost. The cage labeled Ghost was open. The chain inside snapped. Ranger sniffed it, then backed away, his tail tucked, his breathing short and fast. He was remembering, and then a noise. Behind them. Footsteps. Caleb turned, gun raised. A man stepped from the shadows. Not Cole Hawthorne. This one wore a white coat, mid-50s, sharp eyes behind wire-framed glasses. Calm. Too calm. "I was wondering how long it would take for one of you to come back," the man said, though I didn't expect him to survive. Caleb aimed the pistol. "You're from Sentinel." The man didn't blink. "Dr. Ezra King, lead researcher. And you're interfering with property of the United States government." "He's not your property." "He's classified," Dr. King said coldly. "You have no idea what that dog was bred to become." "I know what he didn't become," Caleb snapped. "He didn't become your weapon." King took a step closer. "He was never meant to live outside the program. He wasn't made for it. You think he's normal? He's not. He reacts to frequencies humans can't hear. He senses hostility, rage, even illness. He was designed to detect threats before they act." Caleb didn't lower the gun. "So that makes him dangerous?" King nodded. "To us? Yes, because if he bonds with a civilian, he begins to override his programming. He stops obeying fear. He stops being predictable." Behind him, Ranger let out a deep growl, primal, low, protective. Dr. King glanced at the dog and smiled. "There it is, the override. He chose you. That's why you'll never control him again." "I don't want to control him," Caleb said. "I want to protect him." King's smile vanished. "You can't." Suddenly, a blast behind them. Flashbang. Caleb hit the ground, ears ringing, eyes stinging from the sudden light. Ranger barked wildly, spinning, trying to shield him. When the haze cleared, King was gone. So was the hallway. Metal shutters had slammed down, locking them in the kennel room. "No, no, no, no." Caleb ran to the exit, slammed his fists on the steel. Ranger barked twice, then began pawing at the far corner of the room. A vent, barely wide enough for a child, let alone a man. But a dog? "Yes," Caleb muttered, crawling to him. "You can fit." "I can't." He pulled a tracker from his pocket, magnetic, GPS activated. He clipped it to Ranger's vest. "You need to go. Find him. Find King. I'll find my way out." Ranger hesitated, then licked his hand once and slipped inside. Gone. Caleb stood alone in the dark, his heart pounding. His only hope now was a dog trained to fight, choosing instead to rescue. Hours passed. The air inside the locked kennel room was thick and still. Caleb had tried everything, kicking the steel door, pulling at the vent grates, even prying open the emergency panel. Nothing worked. His knuckles were raw, his voice hoarse. But what hurt most was not knowing if Ranger had made it out. He sat on the cold floor, back against the wall, replaying everything. The moment he found the puppy in the snow, the quiet loyalty, the growls in the dark, the silent looks that meant trust. He'd never asked for this. But he couldn't imagine life without that dog anymore. Just as Caleb began to drift into a restless daze, a sound shattered the stillness. A low mechanical hum. Then a sharp click. The steel door slowly creaked open. Caleb scrambled to his feet, stunned, and standing in the doorway was Ranger, covered in dust, limping slightly, but alive. And right behind him, cuffed, bruised, and barely conscious, was Dr. Ezra King. Ranger had found him and brought him back. Caleb stared in disbelief. "You did this?" The pup walked forward, tail swaying, and rested his head against Caleb's chest. A thank you, a promise, a home. A week later, national headlines exploded. Whistleblower exposes secret K9 experimentation program. Former military dog escapes, brings down government conspiracy. German Shepherd pup sparks investigations, into Sentinel Echo Project. Caleb and Ranger became quiet symbols of something bigger: loyalty over programming, love over orders, choice over control. Elena spoke at the first press conference, confirming the lab's shutdown and demanding full protections for all remaining K9s bred under the project. Cole Hawthorne returned from hiding to testify. The remaining pups were found, rehabilitated, and placed with former handlers or loving homes. And Ranger? He stayed with Caleb. The snow melted that spring. Life began to settle again. One afternoon, Caleb and Ranger sat outside the cabin. Same porch, same silence. But it felt different now, lighter. Caleb threw a stick gently. Ranger chased it with full energy now. No fear, no hesitation. And when he returned, Caleb knelt, wrapped his arms around the dog's neck, and whispered, "You were never broken. You were just waiting for someone to believe in you." Ranger didn't bark. He didn't need to. His eyes, warm, steady, loyal, said everything. He had chosen Caleb, and Caleb had chosen him back, forever. If this story moved you, remember, the strongest bonds aren't trained. They're earned. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this video with someone who believes in second chances, loyalty, and the power of choosing love over fear. Because sometimes heroes don't wear capes. They walk on four paws, and they come back.